There isn't a bigger talking point walking out of SWAC Media Day than the announcement of SWAC TV. And honestly, football will steal all of the headlines, but this is a wide-ranging impact move that goes beyond just the gridiron. Oh yeah, this is Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am DARRION GRAY, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusive. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We'll wrap up today's episode looking at the most predictable SWAC preseason polls I've seen in a long time. I think you and I could have wrote down exactly how this would transpire before we even saw the list. In segment 2, we're going to take a look at ESPN's SWAC scheduling and how they're prioritizing 4 schools, but most importantly and most notably, Jackson State stands above the rest with how they have valued the conference. But we won't kick this thing off the only way that you could kick off a post-SWAC Media Day episode after that SWAC Media Day. Typically, we'll go in and get a quote from a coach. We'll go in and get the player saying something. We'll talk about a quarterback battle. There's a lot of things that we could talk about. We'll get to that down the line. There was not a bigger story to come out of SWAC Media Day than the announcement of SWAC TV. And I know I started off today's episode saying that the impact goes beyond just the gridiron. I'm going to take it a step further. I would say that football isn't even the biggest winner in the announcement of SWAC TV. SWAC TV is going to be a hub for every single sport that the Southwestern Athletic Conference has to offer. Every single one. You will be able to see every single sport, and that has been a problem in the past. That's the biggest reason, the biggest driving force on why I think that football, though the headliner, though the highlight, though the ones who will probably see the biggest benefit from their boost, they are not the ones who get boosted the most. There are literally sports that did not have a home. I had to listen to Bethune-Cookman's game-winning home run over Florida A&M in the SWAC baseball championship game. I had to listen to it in a championship game. I don't think I've ever watched bowling. I don't even know if I could watch bowling. Now, I understand you may say, how many of these sports are you really going to watch? I don't know how many of them I'm going to and how many I'm not. But what I will say is the difficulty in finding these sports is disappearing with the invention of SWAC TV. It will replace the SWAC digital network. And from everything I hear, it will have much better quality. The SWAC digital network to me was poor quality. I didn't really enjoy watching them, but you did what you had to do at certain times. I think there's a value to centralizing your content in one place. There's a value to saying everything SWAC or the majority of things SWAC will be here. It's not everything because you still have partnerships with ESPN. You still have partnerships with HBCU Go. So you do still have to divide up your platform and divide up your quality games amongst other places for now. I think HBCU Go is here to stay. I don't think ESPN is. And I think that, honestly, the invention of SWAC TV is a good preparation for when ESPN Plus goes away and whatever new moves. The thing that I've seen that's constant with everyone that I've spoken to is no one really knows what's going to happen with ESPN Plus in a couple of years. So why be left out in the rain and saying, oh, ESPN Plus is gone? Now what do we do? Now what do we go solely with HBCU Go? Do we try to find another platform that's broadcasting? Is every school going to take matters into their own hand now? And here's the other thing. You had games that were behind a paywall for specific universities This is conference wide and it's free. That's another huge benefit. Is what if you didn't want to pay for ESPN Plus? I think FAMU had some games behind a paywall on basketball. I could be wrong. But it was one school in the SWAC, and I think it was Florida A&M. What if I don't want to pay for that? Like, what if I don't want to pay for just FAMU, knowing I just want to watch one game, 2 games a year? I'm not paying for all of that for those 80 minutes of action. I'm not doing that. You no longer have to. This is a great move. And I know I'm talking about all of these sports, and I'm trying to hit everyone. I'm trying to hit every single sport, because now you can go somewhere where you watch track and field, you can watch tennis, you can watch bowling, you can watch baseball, you can watch softball, you can watch men's and women's basketball. You don't have to sort through where my football game is going to be. There are so many different ways to watch college football these days. So I know that you've been in this particular situation the same way that I have. You don't know where the game is going to be. Now, if it's SWAC, typically you know it's going to be on ESPN Plus. But if you're talking about anything else, is it on ABC? Is it on CBS? Is it on ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, ESPNU, ESPN Plus? Where is it? You got to Google it. If it's on ESPN Plus, you got to sort through it. I'm not. I understand that going through that process is like, it's not a big deal, Darian. Stop being lazy. And I can admit maybe it is a tad bit lazy. But what I love is that SWAC TV says, I will allow you to be lazy. I will allow you to not have to go through all of this sorting, because here's the thing. If you take the SWAC content, it's not going to be more than 10 games, at least during conference play. You're going to have 10 games. And they dropped a whole 45 game, not playlist, but a schedule. They dropped a 45 game schedule. So you know every game that's going to be up there, but it's not going to be a lot every week. So it's not like I'm going to have to sort through much. I may have to click, I'm there. How many times have you gone to ESPN Plus and HBCUs are in your first selection? I've seen it once or twice. I think I watched so many games on ESPN Plus that are HBCU matchups that I no longer really have to scroll as much. It's almost like they know it's you. Kind of like a streaming platform recommends things for you. On Saturday when I log in at 11 a.m. or 2:30 a.m., not 2:30 a.m., 2:30 p.m., they kind of know I'm here for whatever game that, is playing at the moment. I think that the other aspect of this that is really valuable is the fact that you don't have to compete, you don't have to compete with ESPN Plus. Because they're not trying to compete with you. We're going to talk about them in segment 2, but they're not trying to come in and take a bunch of games. I think that this is the sign of things to come. They are not here to say, we're going to take that game and that game and that game and that game. You're not competing with them. You're not relying on them. You're getting revenue from this, as opposed to trying to get the money that they give you. You're generating your own revenue with your own sponsors, and you know that is paying handsomely because they don't have to charge us for it. But it's all going to go back into the school. Revenue sharing, everything that's going on with NIL, it's too much to keep track of, frankly. I just think like every day it's something new when it comes to this. But we're trying to keep up to date, and we're trying to stay ahead of schedule. And having your own network allows you to stay ahead of schedule. The SEC has their own network. The Big Ten has their own network. The Big 12 has their own network. The ACC has their own network. All of these conferences have their own network. Matter of fact, Texas has their own network by themselves. So you're looking at all of these entities that understand the value of taking your content and placing it in one place. The value of taking your content and maximizing its value by owning your content. And here's the extra little part about it, is there should be replays on there. Replays on there from the previous week of action that were so difficult for me to find on ESPN Plus or access. Sometimes they would just go away. There was no timetable on when they would be there. Did I have to watch them on Sunday? I could usually get till Monday, but once Tuesday rolls around, it was a little bit spotty on whether or not I was going to be able to access Saturday's game, because sometimes I just want to go back and watch. I can't watch every single game, especially not every single game with depth. That's just not possible. I think that SWAC TV will probably do a better job. It's less to house. You're not going to have to get that conference and this conference and that conference and this conference. It's just SWAC. It's about 10 games a week. You can keep those rolling the entire season, or maybe even keep them going into, or maybe like 16 games a week, right out. Let's go out of conference too. But what was I saying? What was I saying? Oh, less games to house. So you can go ahead and store those all on demand. I think that this is beautiful. I think that football is going to get the headlines because we can now watch every single game. There's not going to be a game that you missed. Then again, there wasn't many games that I was like, dang, I wish I could have seen that one. Over the course of my 3-4 years doing this job, I feel like there's been 2 to 3 examples of games that I was like, I wish that was somewhere. But 9 times out of 10, I can find the games. Let's move forward, though. Actually, pause. You are going to still have to divide with ESPN and HBCU Go. I mentioned that earlier, but understand that you're going to lose some bangers, right? Like you're going to lose a big time game here and there. This year, it's Grambling versus Jackson State in Vegas. You're not going to have that game. That game goes to HBCU Go. Every single season, there will be a game like that. Just a matter of what it is. So that's something to look out for. Excuse me. But as we push forward, not the SWAC TV, not the HBCU Go, but the ESPN games. What are those? We'll go through the entire schedule. And my biggest takeaway around it is that they are prioritizing Jackson State over everybody. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, I don't care what your cup of tea is. We're going into WNBA All-Star Weekend. We're going into the MLB. The MLB is coming out of All-Star Week. The NFL is about to start training camp, so football is not that far away. Maybe you want to get in on some of the futures. Maybe, you think you that so Raven. You think you can see into the future. And you know who's going to win the AFC North. That's a very competitive division. You wouldn't see your payoff until the end of the year, but you can already get involved in those. Now, maybe you're new to FanDuel. Put down a $5 bet on something that's very current and see $150 run back into your account in bonus bets when your $5 bet wins. Do it something immediate, get the payoff immediate, but you have to be new. Go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com and get your $150 back in bonus bets if you're new to it. Make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL, Locked On NBA, Locked On NHL, Locked On MLB. Make sure you're checking out all of our big sport platforms that are over pretty much everybody within that organization, association, league, all of that crap. But let's get into ESPN because ESPN has taken the majority of Jackson State's big games, and they are really the majority of those games from ESPN are from Jackson State. Both are true. Let's expand both of those sides, though. I talked about how football usually isn't that hard to find. Well, it's going to be more difficult to find on ESPN moving forward because they have set a clear standard. We are not taking a lot of SWAC games. I don't know if this is going to go forward, but I imagine it will. Right? I think the invention of SWAC TV, HBCU Go having a banger of a schedule. Oh my God. We're going to have to find some time to get that in at some point. Either we're going to try to find some time to get that in tomorrow, honestly. Tomorrow or Monday, we're going to have to find some sort of time to get this in. Speaking of Monday, it's only Wednesday right now as I'm talking. But you have put some bangers in the chat. You have put some bangers in the comments, and I can't wait for Mailbag Monday. That may actually stretch into 2 segments instead of just one because I've already pointed out, I think, 2 or 3 comments that I loved. Keep them rolling. Keep them rolling. We might make this 2 segments on Monday. But anyway, the full ESPN schedule. Oh, excuse me. I talked about it's not hard to find. The ESPN schedule is here. I got it from the Alabama State Athletics page. And it's funny because I don't know if they edited this or what the situation was, but they actually spoiled the SWAC TV reveal. On there, if you go, it says it was July 15th. And they said that the SWAC TV schedule will be announced on July 16th at 10:30 a.m. No one knew what that was at the moment. I didn't see it until the SWAC TV was already revealed when I was trying to gather all of these games in one place. But anyway, what you're going to see through the schedule is a lot of Jackson State, FAMU, Southern, Alabama State. You're going to see a lot of them. Those 4 teams make up, well, I can't count them because they have a lot together, but FAMU, Southern, Jackson State technically have 4 games on ESPN this year. In my opinion, Jackson State's the only one with a true 4. I think that Southern and FAMU are right there with Alabama State with 3. But still, you go through it, the majority of the games come from those schools. And I'll explain why I kind of discredit Jackson, or excuse me, I discredit FAMU in Southern's 4th game. And I think it'll be clear afterwards, but we'll see. Second thing is, go look at Jackson State's schedule. No matter of fact, I'll pause right now and you just think about it. Well, you'll pause me. I'm not going to actually pause. But after I speak, what are the biggest games on Jackson State's schedule in the mind that just pop up in your mind? Because for me, I said Jackson State versus Southern, Jackson State versus FAMU, Jackson State versus Bama State. I kind of threw Jackson State Alcorn in there. I've never been. That feels more like a rivalry game that is important to those involved. But for me, that doesn't do anything for me right now. Jackson State versus Alcorn, it's like, if I ever go to the game, I'm sure I'll change my mind. But as it stands right now, it isn't the rivalry that gets me going as an outsider. And then probably Jackson State versus some non-conference team. Those were the 5 games that came into my head. 4 of those games are on the ESPN schedule. That's what I mean when I say that Jackson State's biggest games, the majority of them are going to be on ESPN. Let's read the schedule. You have Southern versus North Carolina Central on ABC. FAMU versus Howard on ESPNU. Bama State, Bama State versus Southern on ESPN Plus. JSU versus Southern. Now, everything else is TBD, so I'm going to assume ESPN Plus. But JSU versus Southern, Bama State versus JSU, TSU versus Grambling, Alcorn versus FAMU, Bama State versus Alabama A&M, Jackson State versus FAMU, Southern versus Alcorn, Alcorn versus Jackson, Bethune-Cookman versus FAMU. Then you got the SWAC championship game, which is on ESPN2, in the Celebration Bowl, which is on ABC. Now, as you go through there, I didn't say many games. There's pretty much one game every single week. The only exceptions are Bama State versus Jackson State and TSU versus Grambling on October 11th. And then November 22nd, you have Jackson State versus Alcorn, FAMU versus Bethune-Cookman. Rivalry week, that's a different conversation, right? Those are the only 2 weeks that you have more than one SWAC game on ESPN. Now, the reason I say Southern and FAMU, to me, don't really have 4 is because they're contracted into a game. Southern versus North Carolina Central on ABC is them being contracted into a game with the MEAC SWAC Challenge. It didn't matter who was there. It was going to be on ABC. It could have been Mississippi Valley State versus Howard. It would have been on ABC. Sorry, Howard. I couldn't think of nobody. Morgan State. That was unnecessary. I don't mind shooting at Valley, but I got love for the MEAC. I was just trying to think who was the worst team in that conference. Also, Buckley T. Buck, I like what he was saying on that stage. I ain't gonna lie. It was the first time I got excited about Mississippi Valley State in a long time in what they were able to bring to the table. It actually got me excited about what they could be. I'm not gonna lie to you. So I'll talk about that at some point too. But you go through it. You take out the Orange Blossom Classic, which is FAMU versus Howard. That was going to be on ESPNU no matter what. I saw it last year with Alabama State versus Central. It was on ESPN platforms. It was on Disney platforms, right? Like I saw it there. So the OBC and the MEAC SWAC Challenge are contracted games to be on ESPN. I don't think I'm going to put that in the Southern and FAMU categories. I just don't. Maybe FAMU, maybe because they're so synonymous, but because they took that year away, I'm not going to give them credit for it. That drops them down to 3. Oh my gosh, what a dip. What a dip they take. Like, this is still a Jackson State, Southern, FAMU, Alabama State centric schedule. And I think it says a lot. ESPN did not choose a lot of SWAC games. Let's be very clear. ESPN did not choose a lot of SWAC games. They took basically 1 a week, and they did 2 on 2 separate weeks. If you take Jackson State, Southern, Alabama State, and FAMU out of the picture, you take all games that involve any of those parties out of the picture, you'd have 2 games. You'd have TSU versus Grambling, and then you'd also have, actually, that'd be it. It's not no second one. I was gonna say Alabama A&M versus Alabama State, but you took Alabama State out. If you took out 4 schools. Let's be generous and say 3. Then you have 2. But you took out the 4 schools that make up the majority of this. FAMU has 3 games. Southern has 3 games. Alabama State has 3 games. Jackson State has 4 games. You took those 4 schools out. The only game that doesn't involve either one of those parties is Texas Southern versus Grambling on October 11th. Let's be generous and say I allow you to keep games that include Alabama State, but you have to remove ones that have the other 3 in it. You would have Alabama State versus Alabama A&M, the Magic City Classic, and then you would have TSU versus Grambling. This schedule is dominated by 4 SWAC schools. Alcorn kind of gets thrown in the mix because they have 3 games too, but their 3 games come against 3 of the big 4 schools, right? Like they got Jackson State, they got FAMU, and they got Southern. I mean, I guess you got to have them in there for something. But to me, it's nowhere near the same. They don't stand on their own the way that Alabama State does. But yeah, and you look at Jackson State, look at all the games they got. Jackson State versus Southern, Boombox Classic. It's a repeat of last year's SWAC championship game, a predicted preview of this year's SWAC championship game. Jackson State versus FAMU still does something for me, right? It was just a year away, kind of 2, because Jackson State was bad the year that FAMU won it all. And then FAMU was bad the year that Jackson State won it all. So, how do we really look at that? How do we really look at that is the question. But it still does something for me. That rivalry still does something for me. I consider it a big game every year. Jackson State versus Alabama State is a big game every year. We will talk about that on Monday. There was a comment in there that I'm kind of tired of hearing from Alabama State fans, and I want to address it my way on Monday's episode. Then you have Jackson State versus Alcorn, which, like I said, that's a rivalry. That's the Soul Bowl. You're going to have a lot of things going on with that. So Jackson State, the majority of their games, big games, are there. The only ones that are missing are JSU versus Hampton. HBCU go. That's the opener. And Jackson State versus Grambling, which is in the Las Vegas HBCU Classic. Also HBCU go. I kind of forgot about those 2 games when I said all of their games in my preparation for this. But as I did it, I was like, oh, okay, those are the 2 games that are heavy hitters that are not on the ESPN schedule. You couldn't take them all, but you got 4 out of the 6. Yeah. Anyway, I see what they prioritize as far as a brand. They look at Jackson State as the clear most valuable school, and we're going to get every single opportunity that we can to have them on our platform. Now, as we push forward, predictable. Very brief, because it's very predictable. The SWAC preseason polls could have been written by you 2 weeks ago, and you would have been spot on. Let's explore them as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, I don't think that this is going to take long, but a SWAC Media Day review, recap, you do need to talk about what the predictions are. But as we can predict, Jackson State, Southern, they're on top of their divisions. I'll say what the one surprise could be. If you wanted to find a surprise, if you're like, hey, I just want to see something I didn't expect when it came to the SWAC Media Day polls, then maybe you would say the distribution of first overall votes, right? Like first place votes. When it comes to Jackson State, they got 16 of the 22. I thought it was going to be unanimous, maybe 1 to 2 out, but you got 3 votes for FAMU, 2 votes for Alabama State, 1 vote for Bethune-Cookman. Then you go to Southern. Southern had 17 votes. You couldn't have told me that if we're counting the first place votes, that A, Jackson State wouldn't have the most, and then B, that Southern would have more. Now, I understand that feels like the same thing, but to me, when I look at Southern had a lot of games that could go either way. I think that the West in general is a very wild division. We've talked about it multiple times as the Wild Wild West, and it has always lived up to that nickname. I think that Southern could come in and win. They deserve to be the favorites, but Alcorn could come in and win. PV could come in and win. But Alcorn got 2 votes for first place. PV got 1 vote. Now, what you'll see as you go through the individual point totals is that there's a clear top 3 in the SWAC East. JSU, FAMU, Alabama State. I think that's been the case for a minute. That's what we look at it as, and that's what it should be until someone proves it otherwise. Like, I think every year I walk out feeling like those were the 3 best teams. Then on the SWAC West, it's Southern, a pretty nice size gap. Also, it's a pretty nice size gap between Jackson State and FAMU, just for the record, right? Jackson State has 126 points. Florida A&M has 99. Southern has 120 points. Alcorn has 90. So it's a 30-point gap there. It's a little less than 30 points in this one on the East. I just think I was a little bit surprised. I think that there's a bigger separation on the East than there is the West. I just think that we should have seen less consensus on the West because Alcorn could come in and they could use their first team all SWAC running back, right? I think the quarterback's still there. I kind of like the Alcorn quarterback, to be honest. I can't remember if he left in the portal, but if it's the same guy from last year, I like the kid. PV was surprising, right? Like if I had to guess, Jackson State, FAMU, Alabama State, Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Mississippi Valley State. That's the East. I think we all expected that. We may have questions about FAMU and Alabama State, but we knew that it would go Jackson State, FAMU, Alabama State, Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Mississippi Valley State. We all knew that. When it goes to the West, I guess it's a little less predictable, but I think we knew that the top 3 would be the top 3. You had Southern, Alcorn, PV in that order. That's what I expected. Did I think that PV was going to climb to number 2? Yes. Did I think PV was going to get more than 1 first-place vote? Yes. Do I understand why they didn't? Yes. Then you go Texas Southern, Grambling, UAPB. I'd say once you get to those 3, specifically TSU and Grambling, it's like, okay, whatever. What order you want to put them in? It doesn't feel like it's a married 4 or 5. There's 60 points to 55 points. It's a very narrow margin. But to me, preseason polls, extremely predictable. I knew Jackson State would be first. I knew Southern would be first. I think we all did. And I think we expected them to be followed up by FAMU and Alabama State, and then Alcorn and PV. You picked the order you thought it'd be in, and I knew Alabama A&M would be 4, right? Like predictable. But we'll see what ends up happening. The writing was on the wall, but we don't know if that's exactly how it's going to pan out. Even if we all expected this to be the preseason poll order, does not mean that this will be the postseason poll order. I can't wait, man. Football's here. All right, tomorrow we'll be talking about some All-Americans for sure, unless something crazy happens. We'll be talking about the HBCU players who made the All-American list. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.